And so walking you through, the
Okay.
problem was that rusted out culvert. So, 90% of the culvert's in good shape. It's just that 6 inch, 1 foot, or so at the bottom. That's really, unfortunately, gonna undermine the culvert. And a lot of times the city or county doesn't realize how bad it is until it starts eroding and all of a sudden shows up at the surface. So if you can catch it early like this, you have a chance for, a tenth of the price to fix this culvert. So in this case, they were able to call me up, ordered a couple rolls of this material, comes on a roll, and what it is about 3 foot wide, about 33 foot long for this size material. And here we are cutting it into roughly 5 foot pieces, and then we're going to shingle it down the pipe.
Hey, Stormwater Warriors. This was a really cool episode with Kevin Good from Coleman Moore Company. But he is going to share a lot of projects and products, and we've got pictures and videos. And so if you're listening to this episode, you just may want to flip over to our YouTube channel and watch this particular episode. Still great content, still a good conversation with Kevin. I've known him for a long time. I hope you enjoy it, but there are some visuals. So fair warning. All right, let's get to the pod. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Stormwater World podcast. Today, we've got my friend Kevin Good with the Coleman Moore Company here on the pod to talk about a whole lot of stuff. Kevin, so glad you were able to come and take some time to be with me here today. How are you, sir?
Hi, Ty. Doing well.
Cool. Well, as you know, if you've watched any episodes, we got to start with a little bio. So Kevin, with over 15 years of experience in construction, sales, and project management, is a passionate and innovative leader in the civil engineering industry. He specializes in providing infrastructure solutions for clients, including DOTs, airports, railroads, the Army Corps of Engineers, DNR, NRCS, cities, counties, and large-scale commercial projects. Kevin works closely with engineers, contractors, and government agencies across the Midwest to build a stronger tomorrow. He has successfully delivered multiple projects with clients such as the Army Corps of Engineers, Iowa DOT, Wisconsin DOT, the Iowa NRCS, Des Moines Airport, and the Iowa DNR. But we are missing a title, sir. What is your title with the company? What do you call yourself?
Pretty much, I'm their sales manager, and
Gotcha.
I'm our main salesperson. So I'm some days the best salesperson, and some days I'm the worst.
Right. So you have sales meetings with yourself and just to chastise yourself on why you're not doing better. Is that how that
Exactly.
works?
It's a look in the mirror. Yes.
Well, we know in this business, man, if you're going to sell something, you got to know some stuff. You can't, it's not like well, I guess you should always know stuff if you're going to sell stuff. But man, in our pre-show notes, you've got a lot of stuff you want to talk about, my friend. Where do you want to start? You want to just start at the top? Go look at the, you want to beat up should we beat up Riprap first?
Everything has its place. But do we sell riprap? No. So yes, let's definitely take that on. What I
Right.
did
Right.
for our list was I actually had a chance to speak at the Iowa Stormwater conference about 2 years ago. So I kind of took the same format that we were able to talk to at that conference.
Okay. Sounds
And
good.
so me getting a chance to do that presentation. So maybe if you're in Iowa, you might have a sneak peek. Rest of the country, here you go.
Right. So where do we want to start then? Like you've got a note, not a project with the NRCS. You want to talk about that project?
So the Iowa NRCS, Natural Resource Conservation Service, for those that don't know. What we did was there was a project on the West Fork
Hey,
of the Des
thank you.
Moines River.
I did not know. I did not know. Sorry to
Um,
interrupt you, but I did not know. So what was that again for everybody? The NRCS?
so Natural Resource Conservation Service.
Okay,
Typically
gotcha.
they're inside like the
Gotcha.
USDA buildings. But so what it is
Okay.
these engineers that work with a lot of the counties on different projects. And in this case, it was up in northern Iowa on the bank of the West Fork of the Des Moines River. What was happening was every year that the farmer would continue to lose ground, and we're talking feet at a time. So the way
Oh,
this
wow.
river was, it was very corrosive soils or very eroding soils, and it was going to be threatening a road within a couple years. And so NRCS said, "Hey, we're going to armor this stream bank and make sure that that river stays where it's supposed to be. The problem was you get into certain parts of the state, there's not much for rock riprap. And so the trucking on that was going to be well over 100 miles in one direction. So we were able to use a product where they were able to fill these on-site baskets with the existing soil and then basically have vegetation. So an armored embankment with a product called ArmorMax, and it's a high performance TRM that they put on the front of it. So basically these 15-foot sections, think of like an accordion, and you'd have these 3-foot by 3-foot cells. You fill that with all the existing on-site soil, and then you can build up from there. So this entire couple thousand feet of riverbank required exactly 0 aggregate.
Gotcha.
And
Hey, since you have that in the presentation, do you have some pictures of that?
yeah, sure do. And what I can do
Okay.
is send over or
Yep.
share
Yeah.
screen.
What we'll do, we can link. Yep. We can link that. Well, we can link that in the show notes. If you want to go ahead, we didn't necessarily look at that pre-call, but if you want to share your screen, if you want to click that button and try to share your screen, we can real quick, or I can just link it. I can just link your presentation in the show notes for anybody that wants to see that. But I kind of dig it since you have the, if you have the presentation there. If not, no worries. We can keep on.
Actually, I do
chatting.
for all of them. So if you
Hey,
want me to pull it up,
yeah.
Trying to make it as easy as possible for you.
Yeah, should be a share button there. And then I don't do a lot of sharing on this side during the call, so I don't know if I can walk
share
you through.
presentation. Okay, got it. Let me pull up just 2 seconds. And yeah, this actually could help out with the visuals a lot for it.
Yeah, so for folks listening, you can just pop over to YouTube and see some of this stuff, or like I said, we'll link the presentation in the show notes as well if you want to go back and check out some of these projects, because we're going to talk about multiple projects today.
Right. Okay, so I can, if you want, share my screen. Yes.
All right. Talk me through this image.
What's going on here? This is kind of halfway through the project, but they, at this point, on the right-hand side, you can see that sandbar, and they were able to move that sandbar over to the left-hand side and actually fill in that entire bench, which is about a 50-foot offset, and then also fill 2 units high, do a 50-foot bench, and then do another 4-foot unit. So what I'll share you next, here's how it started off. So this was when it was starting to encroach on that road. And
wow.
You can even see kind of down towards the bottom in the river where the riprap at one point was, and then how much more it still eroded back from that.
I mean, how far under that, where we see the vegetation, how far under does that erosion go? How much of a hang do you have there? I mean, literally, how many more rainy seasons do you think that road had? I mean, isn't that a road right there? Isn't that like a little road? I mean, we're talking.
Yep. And what was cool, Ty, was the NRCS had actually documented over the years.
Yeah.
And so you can kind of see from the left-hand side where it was. And then that was back in 2006. The middle picture is 2011. And then on the right is 2017. So it was, over the years, definitely starting to move.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Then this was when they started moving material. One thing I do want to point out, because I know somebody's going to ask the question, this area of river was considered a drainage district. And so they did not have to file the same permits to be on the river, which is why, you're not seeing quite the erosion control measures as they were doing that project. But if you went up or downstream, then they would have had to file, different permits. So it's just kind of funny, different jurisdictions, different, requirements.
Right.
And this is kind of the profile view. So there's actually 4-foot tall units, 3x3 cells. So there's 2 levels of that, but they did it and they buried those about a foot or so below the lowest scour point that they were planning on. Then there was a 50-foot or 40-foot offset, and then another unit up at the top. So kind of quickly going through, this was as they were setting that bottom level of units. There's actually no bottom, and they were just using all the sand and riverbank material to put inside. They were then kind of once they were pushing material behind there, they were anchoring into the bank, kind of keeping it in place in that direction.
Oh, wow.
And
Okay.
these are all HESCO units. So actually, the same company makes the units. So you'd see this sometimes for like flooding, on a river, and they'll sometimes stack those up or so. Same deal, but this case, they're putting a high performance TRM on the front of it. So they're getting ready. This was their second lift, and then doing that 40-foot bench. And that's just before we're going to cover those up. Then what they'll do is before they put down this material, they'll actually put down a seed and soil mix to help promote vegetation. Ideally, this entire project goes back in and blends into the environment.
Gotcha. Hey,
They're
what's
also using
I'm
some
gonna
gas.
I'll show. I'm always willing to show my ignorance for our listening audience. What's TRM? What's that stand for?
Oh, turf reinforcement mat.
Oh
And
yeah,
so
okay, that
what
makes
it is
gotcha.
in this case, it's a 75-year UV inhibited mat where it will still have tensile strength even at that point. But the goal is for still having vegetation grow up through that, and typically within a couple months, this will start blending back into the environment.
Gotcha.
So come winter, they were just finishing it up. I think it was spring the next year or so. They were getting vegetation. They didn't plant as much seed, so we were hoping for a little more vegetation. But at that point, didn't show up yet. Handled a couple winters, with freeze thaw, and then the real test ended up being when there was water. We had our first big flood about a year or so after the project went in. And so then the USGS is there, they have a gauge to kind of monitor the river levels. And that was just up about a mile or so up the way from where this is at. So it's about 2,600 cubic feet a second worth of water going, around that bend. And now we're in a couple more years, and pretty much, it's looking good at this point.
Nice. Very cool. All right.
And
Well,
so,
so go ahead.
I was thinking at this point, it's kind of one of those that, from a stormwater standpoint, if you can keep the soil and sediment where it's at. And so this is just one of those where, again, erosion always seems to be a big thing with stormwater. So how do we maybe use the same things that sometimes work against us, but now work for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So next on our list, I mean, I don't know if you need to grab some different slides, but you've got on here on our notes some resiliency against extreme rainfall events. Do you want to talk about that just in general? Do you, if you don't, you can unshare if you don't want to share the share your screen right now, or if you had some different slides you want to
Um,
share, feel free to pull those up. But what
I'd
what do
say
you
go
want to talk
figure. I
about?
got some slides for you. Um,
Nice,
the
perfect.
reason I bring this up is resilient infrastructure. We're finding very often that roadway that was the once in 50-year storm event now, or 100-year storm event, now is getting overtopped every 5 or 10 years. The creek fills up, and then that water has to find another way to go. So that stormwater, is not going to be stopped. So now it's that roadway which becomes kind of its own dam. Well, a controlled overtopping is when it goes over that roadway, and then it's a matter of reinforcing that downstream side so that you don't have it undermine and basically erode the roadway. And what I'm going to pull up here in a second is over by Omaha and Council Bluffs, Iowa, where they armored the downstream side of the interstate. And it's basically the Missouri River that got out of its banks and then went over the interstate. And so the Iowa DOT has a number of these areas where these big storm events, it's a matter of either they have to create more area for that water to go. Again, that's kind of hard to do with the Missouri River, or at some point, just how do we armor so that knowing when the river goes out of its banks, we don't lose the interstate. And
I,
we'll pull that up here.
yeah, we could use that. I live, I don't know if you know, I live a couple hours outside of Houston. So
I do, over by Beaumont.
yeah, I live in Orange, Texas. So like,
Yep.
yeah, there's definitely some areas that could use some of that.
I
So
put up some sports lights years ago out that way. Uh, my Texas days.
go ahead, Kevin.
All right,
Explain it. Well, what are we looking at?
we'll start.
So
So
our armoring of the highway, and we're using some Flexamat. So go ahead.
So this
Yeah.
ended up being about 3 miles worth of Flexamat for this project, and I'm going to stop it right here. So where I'm standing, just behind me is Omaha, and so this was Interstate 680, and then I-29 was just up the way that kind of runs north and south into the Dakotas and down into Kansas. Um, what they were doing here was this is the downstream side, and they're putting down a 10-ounce non-woven, and then they're rolling out the Flexamat tied concrete block is basically the generic name for that. Um, and this was right after a overtopping. So this summer, I was going back a couple of years, the Missouri River had already overtopped, and then it had scoured out part of the bank, and so it was working to undermine the interstate. So what they're doing is basically it's a 16-foot wide mat that they're now putting in place, and they're also adding some earth anchors into that. Well, the hope is that if they did have an extreme event, the mat, if anything else, will hold up to the hydraulics of that river going over. But then it would, if anything, undermine the Flexamat and not undermine the interstate. Basically, a lot cheaper product than rebuilding the interstate.
Gotcha. Yeah, so anybody that's listening, if you've never seen Flexamat being installed, it's awesome. So it's just so crazy watching this roll
And
of concrete just be
and you can
unrolled.
see the top left there, that's the water that's still in the farm fields because from that last
Oh,
rain
okay.
event in time.
Yep.
So it's literally the same
Mhm.
summer. Well, then it starts raining again, and we'll show you in a second here what happens. Um, they didn't get the product even all the way in before it was going to overflow again.
Oh, wow. So was that by design? It looks like they did okay, yep. So they did an asphalt substrate and then they put the Flexamat down, and then are they coming back on top of the Flexamat with more asphalt? Is that what I'm
So
seeing, or?
actually, that substrate was just the 10-ounce non-woven, but I could see where you're thinking it's
Really?
black.
Oh, the
Yep.
black. Oh, well, that was some geosynthetic that was down underneath. Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
And then
Okay,
they
cool,
put the
cool.
flat mat down, and in this case, they're actually putting about a foot of soil over top. And I think that had something to do with if a car goes off the road, then it's
Great.
just onto the dirt. The
Yep,
plan was
yep.
on the initial plans was do about a foot and a half or 2 foot of concrete along that leading edge. The reason that they have asphalt is because I was like a Thursday or Friday. Um, they got a call from the DOT that said, "Hey, the river's planning to go over by like Sunday. It's going to go over again. We need to get this locked in." And so the quickest thing to put down was asphalt. So that's the reason they're actually putting asphalt down. And this is a matter of time. And then there it goes over again, was what it looks
Yeah,
like then actually overtopping.
gotcha.
I'll show more of a close up here. So that, if you remember where my sign was, and I showed you earlier on,
Mhm.
that's then the
Yep,
river going over and then trying to scour out on the downstream side.
gotcha. Interesting. So where does Coleman Moore come in, and where do you guys stop and start at? Do you guys provide the products? Do you guys also provide consulting on the project? Do you guys do design work? What all do you guys do in this kind of situation?
So we are a distributor, and kind of where we fall in is a little bit more on the specifications and the initial design work. So kind of myself and our owners do get involved kind of earlier on in the project, and I want to say a lot of supply houses. I kind of come from a consulting background, and so with kind of previous work, it's always been about trying to get with your civils and geotechs, and making sure that they're on board. And then in this case, also with, DOT and stuff like
Right,
Army
right.
Corps.
No, it's just there's a lot of moving parts, it looks like, to this project, so it's interesting.
Right. So overall, it's now been in. I think they had one more event not too long ago, but it's been in like 5, 6 years, holding up great.
First installation, still holding up, huh? You said six
Still holding
years?
up.
Did you guys do any estimates on what you guys thought it would be good for? Are we looking at a 10, 15, 20 year, or just kind of, I mean, it's obviously going to depend on how many times it it breaches, but at the same time, you gotta usually you're gonna do some sort of guesstimates or something, right? Did you guys do any of that, or how long do you guys think it's
So I
gonna last?
believe the product itself is like a 25 or 30 year grid. In other words, UV, kind of holding those blocks together. Though the thing is, once you get soil or vegetation on top of it, should kind of push out that time frame considerably. So in this
I
case, with
got
it being buried, I mean, it really should be good for quite the time frame moving forward. That's again the good and bad with getting into plastics and other, kind of material that at times it works in your favor on longevity.
gotcha. Nice. All right, cool. Well, if you don't have any final thoughts on that particular project, I think we've got the big elephant in the room. Aging infrastructure. You ready for that, or did you have some other thoughts on this project?
Nope, not on this one. I did want to maybe bring up, if I could, the rock bags for kind of
Sure.
extreme rain
Oh,
events.
yeah. Sure. Yep. Absolutely. Yep.
No worries. Um,
I
yeah,
totally skipped over those looking at my
no,
notes.
you're good.
I see them right there. Emergency repairs.
Sorry, I'm
Emergency
just trying to
repair.
figure out these videos here. It's a little wonky.
Oh, that's all right. I think that one worked out well.
Yeah. So this one. Um, all right. So are you seeing it now?
Still the same video. Probably easier to stop share and then restart. Oh, there it is.
Okay, you got it.
I feel like I know what that is too, but I'm not going to say in case I'm wrong.
No, I want
Pretty cool.
guesses.
No, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing
Actually, my
it.
favorite question is,
Uh,
so these are 2 ton rock bags, or filter units as they're truly called.
uh,
The best part is when you tell somebody that and they go, "Well, how much, does it hold?" And I'm like, "It holds 2 tons." It's kind of in the name, but that's okay. Um,
yeah, right.
so we happened upon this at IECA a number of years back, and sitting there looking at it, everyone, city, county, DOT, has a project, at least one or two spots where if you ask them, "Hey, do you have riprap that's been washed away?" Sure enough, they go, "Oh yeah, every year I come back to the same spot and I dump a couple more loads of rock, and then every year washes away." Okay, maybe could we do something to change that? So kind of Flexamat was one option, some of that Scour lock was another. This is about as plain and simple as can be. If we took that same aggregate and just, confined it, wouldn't it hold it up and stay in place? So
Right.
that's what we're talking about here.
Okay.
The reason I bring this up now is with these extreme rain events, you get higher hydraulics, and seems like a lot of times they'll use bigger rock. Well, if the small rock washed away, why don't we use bigger? So at some point, bigger rock even then can get undermined. With these, the nice part is you're able to use smaller material, and it actually allows the sediment to kind of filter in. So this product's been around since the 80s, and it's actually out of Japan. Where we got involved was they initially used it for bridges, and so it's called a filter unit because you put these down and it sediments in. You think about like riprap on the bank, you'll use a geotextile underneath sometimes to kind of keep it from undermining. Well, you can't in the middle of a stream or a creek, but you can use these rock bags and then have that same effect as far as it filters in with the sediment. And so the Iowa DOT was interested in this. So I called up the Wisconsin DOT on a whim and I said, hey, does your department, have any issues with scour around bridges? And they said, we sure do. Well, by that Friday, they already had us all on a conference call. And this is the project we actually then about a month later installed at. And what it is
Very cool.
these two pillars. This is up on Lake Superior. So go up to like Duluth, Minnesota, and go an hour straight east, and you're in Wisconsin. To the right of these gentlemen, that's Lake Superior. And what would happen is, as these storms come in, they would get what was basically a bathtub effect. The storms would create movement with all the sediment. So at one point, they'd go out and measure, and it could be 6 foot of scour. They'd go back 6 months later and it's 12 or 14 foot of scour, to the point where they almost had to shut down the bridge for semi traffic. And I think it was about an hour and a half in detour time if they weren't going to allow the semi traffic over this bridge. So what I'll show you here is kind of just what we ended up doing was 100 2-ton rock bags as a way to place that around and kind of keep some of that sediment in place for those pillars so it wasn't going to be undermined.
You say 100 of these bags?
100 of these, yep.
Oh.
And okay, I will point out, you see this gentleman in the rowboat? What was going on is normally they would have a diver in the water. Well, this was like October, November. And so what they did is they actually went out and bought a rowboat off of like Craigslist for $100 and put him in the rowboat. So as they lower this into the water, he would come over and unhook the chain, and then they would pull the chain up, and it saved them from having to be in the water. And so this is the area that they went ahead and armored. This was us just staging all the bags on the kind of the landing area. So what they would do is they'd fill them over on the side, on the right-hand side, and then they'd actually drive them up onto the bridge where that dump truck is.
Gotcha.
And then we had one lane closure, as they were coming up with the rock bags. And up top, they were kind of making sure to offset those in about 6-foot increments, because the bags end up being about 6 foot in size. We were trying to put like a layer of bags down. So he's measuring off those distances. There's us hooking it up with the lifting chain. That's about a 40-foot piece of chain. And then unhooking there, which was a lot easier than having a diver in the water. This was kind of cool. They're actually using sonar. And then, so at this point, I stop here for a second. So this is actually when they went by with that passive sonar, you could see where all the bags were being placed. And then, I don't know if I have in this video, but later on, you can't see the bags anymore because of the sediment that's kind of been filtered in. And then this in about 30 seconds, just kind of filling the bags. So all it is you have a frame, they're opening it up kind of like you would a trash bag and garbage can.
Yep. I'd be interested to see how they were doing that with just the aggregate. Were they just pouring it over the side, hoping for the best?
So it's funny you ask about the aggregate. Typically what they would do is they'd get a low head barge and they would go up to the side of the bridge or under the bridge, and then it has like a hydraulic ram, and it just pushes it off, and it falls into the water.
Just dump it in there. Okay.
Yes.
Still seems fairly random compared to how you guys are placing these bags. It's pretty
It's a little more specific, exactly.
Yeah.
And what was kind of cool, I love this picture because we haven't really done a stream bank armoring, but this kind of shows you those 2-ton bags, how you could layer that out just to armor a hillside or stream bank.
I was actually thinking that when you showed that other picture and you're like, oh, this is how we have it staged. I was like, it looks like you need to leave it there. It looks like that where it was staged like that. It's like, oh, it looks like it should be there, helping reinforce that area next to the road. But
and there was one thing. So Wisconsin has awesome material. So this is a very hard granite, but it was super sharp. the one thing that's kind of cool is I told him, look, with this sharp a material, at some point it's gonna, rip one of the bags. Well, there's a special weave to these bags such that it doesn't just zipper open if you have an area that's cut open. So there was one little spot we had on a bag where I pointed out and said, hey, looks like it's torn up. We can fix this and tie it back up. And they said, oh no, we'll just turn it a certain way and place another bag over it. So that was easy enough to handle there. And then this was just what they were doing. They were just taking the trucks, running them up onto the bridge and then taking them off one at a time there.
Very cool.
So in about 2 days, the whole project was done, which was kind of neat.
I got you. Yeah, I guess I was getting ahead of myself because inside of this, our resiliency against extreme weather, now we can jump on that. I don't think we talked about that scour protection yet, do we? We talked about the.
No, I mean I kind of put it into one.
And then the rock bags, and then the scour protection. Did you have some slides that we missed on some of that, or no?
The only other one, maybe just to show you in about 2 seconds, is a Chinook helicopter here. So what this is kind of to me, the wow moment. So this is over in the Netherlands. We have kind of other partners and whatnot. So Ridgeway is a company that sells these rock bags over there, and
Yep.
they were actually able to get footage of a Chinook helicopter placing these. And this is basically the Ministry of Defense, and they had an issue where a levee, had been damaged, and so what they were doing is placing this as kind of a temporary measure, emergency measure. And I just think anytime I can show off some Chinook helicopters, it's pretty darn cool.
Yeah. Did they have an auto release on that? I guess they released it from inside the helicopter somehow.
They
Or
did.
was there somebody down in the water? Okay.
Nope, they released it from inside. So that yellow lifting strap, they drop down. But I just thought that's kind of a fun one to share with you.
Very cool. All right. Well, then it sounds like we're ready to move on to aging infrastructure. If that's not a hot topic, I don't know what is. Right?
Yeah.
Hot topic, sad topic. Like, hey, guess what? We've kicked the can down the road a little too long. Concrete Cabin's 84-inch culvert in Henry County, Iowa.
So, speaking of stormwater, we have a lot of culverts that all this stormwater goes through. And a lot of times those culverts are getting rusted out. And coming from my previous world, I used to be with ADS, and so that was plastic pipe. So that was one of those where it was kind of like, well, everybody should probably go to plastic or something, could last 50, 100 years. Well, I'll be darned if all these counties and cities don't have a lot of metal pipe that they still replace, one rusted out culvert for another with. So in this case, the county market is huge with metal culverts. In this case, Southeast Iowa, Henry County. This was just at the start of COVID. And what was going on is an 84-inch culvert, the bottom's rusted out. And they called up and they said, hey, we have a culvert, that needs some help. We really don't want to dig it up. You're telling us there's this material that you can use on the bottom. And I don't know if you can see my picture right now. What this is this is a piece of it I decided to bring in. So it's a geotextile that has a liner on the backside. The middle section is a bunch of fibers that are actually kind of interwoven, but with concrete. So there's actually a layer of concrete, and then there's a front side that has a geotextile to it. So there's a right and a wrong way, but it's super flexible. Once you add water, then it conforms to whatever shape and gets hardened.
Exactly. It's super flexible until you add water. Then it's super not.
I'm one step away from being an infomercial of just add water.
Yeah, just Sure. No, man, the concrete canvas stuff is like following me around now. I post one video, I had a million people like reach out, DM me, try to sell me concrete. So then, like just a recent episode of the podcast, Concrete Canvas USA, and Nathan came on and did an episode. And then I was just in Minnesota. I met a gentleman with a company there up in that area, and they have the product. So now I'm getting full educated on concrete canvases. So this is cool. This is a great. I can see this being a very good use case because what I learned what you may be telling me here in a second, I may be stealing your thunder, Kevin, is that the cool part is that that material will cure. It even cures even better when it's underwater like that. So we're looking at that pipe and it's stuck with standing water, and even in an application under with where it's sitting in water, it's fine. It's actually good. It makes it even harder. Is that correct?
Correct. You cannot overhydrate it.
Yeah, it's awesome. That's awesome.
And so walking you through, the
Okay.
problem was that rusted out culvert. So,
Yep.
90% of the culvert's in good shape. It's just that 6 inch, 1 foot, or so at the bottom. That's really, unfortunately, gonna undermine the culvert. And a lot of times the city or county doesn't realize how bad it is until it starts eroding and all of a sudden shows up at the surface. So if you can catch it early like this, you have a chance for, a tenth of the price to fix this culvert. So in this case, they were able to call me up, ordered a couple rolls of this material, comes on a roll, and what it is about 3 foot wide, about 33 foot long for this size material. And here we are cutting it into roughly 5 foot pieces, and then we're going to shingle it down the pipe. So just everyone on the crew basically taking a piece, walking it down, and an entire roll weighs 150, 170 pounds, so it's got some heft to it, but these smaller pieces aren't bad. So then the hard part is whoever's on, the screw gun or so, basically tacking it into place. And you do have to get into good material. So the big thing is how high up do you have to go to kind of get into decent culvert?
Right.
And they're
Yeah, that makes
overlapping a couple inches. But at this point, we started at about 8 a.m. By noon, they had everything tacked in place. It's just some screws and washers, kind of a self-tapping sheet metal screw and a washer, and just a lot of, bring a couple extra batteries.
yeah, super. It's a super cool product.
And then they had a hydro seeder they just filled with water since it was dry culvert, adding water to that and just needing to work it in basically so that since you can't overhydrate it, just getting enough so that it will start the curing process.
Yeah,
And they're
for
using the
sure.
broom just to brush it up the sides.
Yep. Yep. Nice.
And so this was by noon. We had everything, good to go. And basically went ahead, and that was the end for the first day. As you can see on both the sides, we haven't done anything there yet. We're allowing it to cure overnight. Um, the next morning, we came back, and if you can see on the left-hand side there, they've started to apply a bead of sealant down the sides, and that's an elastomeric material or so. It's got some give, and that's just to keep the water from getting behind the material. And the reason they stopped there was because they broke like two caulk guns, so they're actually going to go out and buy a electric caulk gun.
Right.
But so everything ends up getting done. I came back after the first winter, and then this was how it was as far as how everything was holding up.
Nice.
And then came back, another year and a half later, and still now everything's looking good. You can see there's been some sediment that's, with the stormwater events, moved kind of material onto that. But
Very
so
cool.
that's just kind of a quick rundown of everybody that has that. We use the same material for a lot of slopes. We do for like some weed suppression, some channels. So there are some other applications. And even out into Nebraska, we have these irrigation canals now that might be 16 or 20 foot wide. And if the concrete starts busting up, we'll actually go over the top of it with this same material and give it a new life, kind of another 100 years or so to the life of that channel.
Yeah, I like that product. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, just add water.
So just add water, no stir, shake and not stir. Do see what else we got. I think we
Oh,
had.
you know what?
You want to talk
One
about
other
the
thing on that
yeah, yeah,
side.
yeah.
So, I yeah, actually, I'll just share two pictures with you. That way, I'll hit home. Um, so I bring this up. Um, Recently, I had a chance to speak to all the Nebraska county engineers at a conference. Well, this was one of the projects that kind of drove that. This is the city of Tecumseh, about 45 minutes south of Omaha. And what's neat about this is a 100+ inch culvert, multi-plate. It's a big cost to replace. The bottom section was rusting out. Go figure. They went out to bid, and the low bid was a little over 120,000 to replace that. So dig it up all out, start over. Also, there was some asphalt up top they were going to replace, but all in 120K. For about just under 10,000, they were able to get all the material and hardware, as well as the concrete canvas. The city crew did it themselves, and so they saved, $110,000 on just one pipe. And now maybe we're not saying this is going to last them 50, 100 years, but it should at least last them 10, 20 years, and kind of get them caught up in some of these maintenance projects. So the way I look at it is it's a long-term band-aid. And I know some counties right now that they'll have 40, 50 culverts that all are rusting out, and either they can do one or maybe they can do 5 or 6 and just try to get caught up a little bit. So that's been really one of our sweet spots, kind of around the Midwest.
Oh, that's fantastic. I think, like I was joking when I said it before, we just been kicking the can down the road for too long. So
It really
it's,
has.
something has to give. So this is a great application. It's a great visual as well.
And
What's next?
final,
Do you? Yeah, twin.
final one
Or
for you on this one. I'm sorry
yeah.
to
No,
go
you're
too
good.
far.
You're good. No, you're fine. I think honestly, I'm trying to think back, Kevin. I think this is one of the first episodes we've done that we've had so many visuals to go along with the explanation, and even a cost saving metric. I think we've kind of touched on a lot of things that I think are important for
I
people to
hope that,
see and understand. So
I
yeah,
hope that
we
helps.
can just keep talking. Okay, cool. All right. So now we gotta see
Yeah.
this this visual here. I would bring this would warm. I always tend to go this route. I just know it would warm my wife's heart. She's going to enjoy. She does the show notes for the podcast, and she's designed many a ditch such as this. So she'll be excited to hear what you have to say. So do a good job. I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
What is going on here? I am out west of Omaha. I'm west of Lincoln. This is Twin Loops Irrigation District. And so what they have is this is a 16-foot wide or so concrete canal. And typically in the summertime, that's going to be full of about 12 foot of water. And they move it all over the water for all the pivot irrigation. So if you ever fly over the Midwest, you see those big crop circles. Well, that's the irrigation that basically is being delivered from this. What's happening is some of these canals are 50 some years old, and as such, they're starting to, with years of freeze thaw, panels move. So what was here on the left-hand side was a traditional concrete canal, but the panels were cracking, they were starting to lose water, and it was a matter of, do we remove and replace, and pour a new section, or do we try something like concrete canvas? So in this case, we were able to leave what was there in place and simply roll out new material over the top, hydrate it, and they now have a newly lined canal for
Yep.
basically, a fraction of the
Yeah.
cost.
In
Um,
Nathan's episode with Concrete Canvas, he talked about it, but we didn't have the visuals to go along with it. So this is fantastic.
And what's pretty cool here is this is 6 foot wide material, but it's a little bit heavier. So what they did is they took an excavator, basically were able to, with a long reach excavator, start it on one side, pull it all the way across, and shingle that down in 6-foot sections. So again, you have to tack it in place, but after that, could be even done in bad weather. And I know when you get out into western Nebraska, you don't always get nice days into the winter where it's the only time that there's no water in the canal, but yet you need to get some work done. So that's kind of just been the fun one lately. Irrigation districts have been a big proponent of this.
Oh yeah, I can't imagine the cost. What did you guys have some numbers on cost savings
The
on
cost
this?
savings was on the install, and I mean we're talking days, because just for the concrete trucks to get out there, you have to make sure it's good weather. Where this stuff, we actually it was a rainy day. We had a bobcat out there setting it in place, and then it's just a couple of crew to pretty much do the work. So I don't have exact
Yeah.
costs, but I mean we're talking a significant savings.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Labor is always going to be a high part of your project cost. So yeah, absolutely. Cool, cool, cool. Well, we got one more thing on the list. I'm down to do it if you're willing to keep visiting with me. I think we've got stormwater inlet protection. You got some projects or some thoughts on that? What do we got over here with polk
So,
soil and water conservation?
all right. So last and final. This is a nod back to my previous employer. So ADS, Advanced Drainage Systems. This is how I believe you and I got to know each other. Was at some conferences up in Minnesota and the
Right.
Minnesota Erosion Control Association. Um,
Yeah.
at that time, what I was involved with was these inlet protection devices below grade. So basically, you pull off the grate, you drop in this system, and then put the grate back on. Captures all your sediment, and you could also do some stuff with hydrocarbons. Well, fast forward about a year or two, Polk County, which is city of Des Moines pretty much, their soil and water conservation district, they got with me and they said, "Hey, we have this lake and we keep having all these algae blooms. And gosh, every couple of years we got to go in and dredge the lake. We're having such a sediment buildup. But yet the neighborhood's been there 20 some years. Where are we getting all of this material from?" So
Right.
what it was, Zach
Yes.
DeYoung was who I worked with there, and over the course of a year, he documented every month just 2 inlets. And so this was one of the inlets we had that we documented what he was capturing through those times. And I'll kind of pull up that second picture here. And what it is the amount of sediment. So from 2 inlets, over 200 pounds. And this is once he dried it, it was 200 pounds. And so it was a lot of grass clippings, some trash. And so from this, it was a kind of a newsletter program to tell the homeowners, can you please, push some of that back into your yard, and maybe we don't have to spend so much darn money, keeping up with the lake, with the algae, and with the sediment. What I thought was kind of funny is there was one month that a garbage truck started on fire, and so by the time the fire department showed up, they were trying to figure out why the storm sewer was on fire, because there was all this dry sediment that was underneath the grate, and all the hydraulic fluids and everything were mixing. And so we actually had to do one replacement inlet filter because that one got burned up in a fire. So I think there was one on there. Yep. City of Des Moines garbage truck fire causes samples to be lost. So we had a not available for 1 month out of that.
That's that's crazy. I don't think I'd ever have that on my stormwater bingo card. My my inlet is on fire.
But to think that we're talking stormwater and 200 pounds from just two
Yeah,
inlets.
just
And
two. Oh yeah. Yeah. We
let's
see it around
multiply
here.
that by, probably 200 or 300 for that neighborhood.
I'm assuming that you don't have any more information on whether or not the campaign was successful or, any feedback or anything, from
No.
yeah. Yeah.
And then that's on a neighborhood that's been, in place. I was at a conference the one time, and gentleman comes by and he says, "I like your product, but it should never be used." And I said, "Okay, I'm curious where this is going." And he goes,
Yeah.
"Well, if we did the correct steps with stormwater, whether it be silt fence, wattles, vegetation, other things kind of prior to it getting on the street or into that inlet, yours is the last line of defense in that case." And I said, "You're right." But, unfortunately, a lot of times it's the last and the first, line.
Yeah. Yeah. The only line. Oh
Yes.
gosh.
But yeah,
Well,
I thought that was a fun one for kind of tying in stormwater.
yeah, man. I mean, we have kudos to you, and I appreciate you taking the time, Kevin. I mean, we've covered the gambit. We've gone from, erosion, erosion control to extreme weather to aging infrastructure to coming back around to Stormwater 101. Don't put your grass clippings down the drain. But that just gets me on my soapbox. So the fact that you know it, I know it, and the people listening to this podcast should know it. And how do we get outside of the echo chamber that is our industry and actually get the public to give a poop about stormwater? So, but I'll get
100%.
back off my soapbox so I can thank you again for being on the call. I don't think we missed anything. I think we covered all the bases. I think this was fantastic. I like the visuals. I hope people will go over. I think the explanation was sound. Hopefully, feel free to give us feedback in the comments um, regarding that, because I kind of like this format. And then those of you that need to see the visuals, like I enjoyed them, make sure you go check it out over on our YouTube channel. Kevin, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. I think that's the pod.
You got it. Thanks, Ty.